Oh, sweet, thank you.
That was so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, are we so lucky to
I know.
have Natalie here with us today? My
Yes,
goodness, I
she's
could
so
sit and listen to you all day.
fabulous.
I feel so blessed and so grateful that you're here with us today. And Diane, what a beautiful song as well. That was my first time hearing it.
We are very blessed with
Very
music.
beautiful.
We are blessed with music.
Wow. Just,
You try to pull yourself
Take a moment.
I need to take a moment. Something's playing tricks on me here.
We have
Oh, well.
we have angels
Uh,
They think they're
So-
funny.
Did you pray ahead?
Did I what?
Did you pray ahead? Like Natalie?
Yeah, tell you, send it up.
So, yeah, wow, just want to really express gratitude for that beautiful music this morning and the beautiful messages as well. So connected to what we're going to be talking about. What I'd like to talk with you about this morning, our theme for April is rebirth and renewal. What a great time for that theme, I think. It's springtime, so everything is in an expression of rebirth and renewal. Of course, Easter is coming up next week. And so that is also a message of rebirth and renewal that we're going to talk a little bit more about. And our Spiritual Oneness Center, this is the Spiritual Oneness Center.
Yes.
Yay! So that message and all that goes with it in terms of our new look and everywhere else that might appear is still unfolding. So you may still see unity here because we certainly are aligned to the messages of unity. But we are reimagining ourselves and recreating and rebirthing our community as the Spiritual Oneness Center to really emphasize the spiritual aspects of this center, of course, and also the oneness that we all share. So we'll be talking a lot about that. I'm thinking along the lines of this spring, this rebirth, this renewal. I just want to take a minute to acknowledge that is really the impulse of Source, Creator, God, the universe, universal intelligence, whatever word or words we use to describe that underlying essence of all of us and all things that runs throughout the universe. The impulse is really to renew and rebirth and recreate, and where damage is done, there's healing that follows. And that's always an opportunity that's available to us because that is the natural expression of this universe. So this is an opportunity, this springtime, this reimagining our center, this Easter time is an opportunity to really look at our own lives as we're coming through whatever we may have gone through or be still maybe a little stuck in. Where are we dormant? Where can we allow that expression, that universal consciousness to begin to unfold and come through us? So we can look at ourselves and our lives and think, where might we be blocked? Where might we be stuck? Where might we be inhibiting that essence that is within us all from expressing itself to its full potential and in its most loving form? So it's an opportunity for reflection. I want to share with you briefly, as Diane or Robin actually mentioned, we met earlier this week. Well, I met with the board and we really spent some time kind of revisiting our vision and our mission and our purpose and our values and all that. And I'm not going to get into all that in one day, but I do want to share the vision. Our vision, and we set a lofty vision, right? To positively transform human consciousness. To positively transform human consciousness. So we're going to spend, gosh, I hope you'll continue to come back because we're going to spend a long time talking about what that even means. What does that look like? How do we do that? But that transformation is really about a rebirth of our own individual consciousness and our collective consciousness as well. It's about that renewal with that rebirth and also bringing that consciousness into spiritual awareness and insight, and perhaps, most importantly, into action, because that's something that we're going to also be talking a lot about during my time here, is how do we bring those insights and that understanding into action? It's not enough to understand all of this, that's the first step. It's the first step on a path that then takes us into expression. And how do we activate that understanding in our own lives? I want to share quickly the purpose for the Spiritual Oneness Center. The purpose of the Spiritual Oneness Center is to create a spiritual community that encourages positive transformation of the whole person, including body, mind, and spirit, leading to a shift in human consciousness and a world where all people thrive. Wow, that's a mouthful, right? I mean, I even could barely get it out. And I have to kind of look at it because it's a little long, and we just kind of refashioned that this week, so it's not entirely committed to memory yet. But I do want to emphasize that spiritual community, right? And also that positive transformation of the whole person. So we're talking about spirit, especially today. We're talking about mind, because that's where we're operating from in this physical universe. And we're talking about body, because that's an important expression of our spirit and of our minds. So we'll be thinking about ways that this center can incorporate activities, lessons, and other events that kind of address the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. So getting back to the kind of the rebirth aspect of this Easter time, the springtime, the center, what does that mean for us now? Because looking around the room, we've been born for a little while. This isn't a new thing for us. So when we're talking about rebirth, we're really talking about, well, we're differentiating it from our first birth, our physical birth as babies, right? When we were born as babies and we grew up. This is a spiritual rebirth. This is, what some people might refer to as being born again. It's born again in this lifetime, our spiritual rebirth, because oftentimes we've gone however long it's been, however many years, and we've sort of become disconnected with our spiritual essence, which is our true essence, which is that essence within us that's just wanting to get out and to express itself in this lifetime. Gosh, I just get emotional. Any little thing. That's just a small thing, right? So it is making the opportunity and the effort to allow that rebirth to happen as a spiritual being in a human body, right? So in that process, and it's a process, we begin sort of like chicks maybe in an egg, to crack that shell, and that understanding is revealed to us, and that's some of the work that we're doing today. This is hopefully a place where we can come and begin to discover where we can let more light and understanding in and begin to break out of that shell into that spiritual rebirth. One of the ways we do that is through our way showers, right? Because sometimes it's like, I don't know, I get what you're saying and I want to do that, but where do we look? Where do we look for guidance? Fortunately, we have a long list of amazing, what we have called way showers. And I kind of like that term because it doesn't mean that we have to try to imitate them or that they set the ultimate example of what we're striving to be necessarily, or that we see them, in contrast or in judgment to ourselves. It's not about any of that. It's about them offering their understanding and guidance so that we can benefit from what they have learned and discovered through their own experience, and then apply that to our lives and see where we can grow. And one of those way showers, of course, is Jesus. Jesus is not the first and last way shower, but he is certainly an incredibly powerful example for all of us, how we can live this spiritual rebirth, this spiritual life in human form that he demonstrated for us so magnificently. And one of the things he taught us, and I think this is particularly appropriate to Easter time, is that he taught us we're so much more than our bodies. We are not defined or limited by our bodies. Our bodies are an aspect of our expression of our spirit, right? They're an aspect of an expression of our minds, but they don't define us. We're not our bodies. We are the spirit beneath the body. And Jesus really showed that to us, especially at Easter time, when he showed us bodies, important, but in the long run, it's not, I don't want to say it's insignificant, but we are so much more. We're so much more. And so, the title of my talk, gosh, I just dove right in. I didn't even mention what it was. Dove into the theme of rebirth and renewal. And the title of the talk today that I want to get into a little bit more now is, it's called On Earth as It Is in Heaven. Mm-hmm. On Earth as It Is in Heaven. And normally, you know, not that long ago, I probably wouldn't have selected a title for a talk that sounds so religious, right? Right out of the Bible, right out of the Lord's Prayer. Because a lot of Jesus's teachings, from my experience and understanding, have been misinterpreted, maybe misused, and we've lost the power and the significance. Here I go again. I'm just a big crybaby. The power and significance of what his messages actually held. It's been lost because we can get caught up in all of the other stuff. Won't go there even by trying to describe it. We all know what that is. Just, you know, beliefs or not beliefs, or rules or not rules, or good or bad, or guilt or whatever, or forgiveness, and all those things. We can get stuck. And we get stuck in there, and we get mired in that kind of dark place, really. And we lose track of what he was really trying to teach us. And so, On Earth as It Is in Heaven really captures the work that we're doing not only this morning, but we're going to be doing at this center indefinitely, as far as I'm concerned. Is how do we manifest our spiritual nature? That heaven, some people call heaven, right? That essence that underlines all things, that perfect, loving essence. How do we manifest that in our lives? How do we bring that to our physical existence? How do we bring that to earth as it is in heaven? So that's really what I want to talk about this morning. And just prior to when Jesus says on earth as it is in heaven, he says, thy will be done. Thy will be done. So I want to maybe take a fresh look at that. Again, to me, that can sound very religious, and that might work for some people, but it's not working for others. And so how can we talk about these powerful messages in ways that can reach everyone, so that we don't let other things stand in our way from really appreciating and grasping onto or understanding and embodying the messages that he shared. So when I hear thy will be done, for me, that thy is not some God out there. It is differentiating our physical self from our spiritual self. So thy will is the spiritual will. It's reminding us to look past our bodies, to look past this identity that we think we've created, and many times it's been created for us, but to look past that identity and past those bodies that we think define us to our true essence, to that spiritual nature. That is thy will. Thy will is in us. Thy is in us. But it helps us see beyond our ego self to our true spiritual nature. So for me, that's the way that I approach thy will be done. It is a practice. How can I allow that spiritual nature that is within all of us and within all things to come forth? I also think when he says, thy will be done, thy will be done, you know, it's easy to just get so used to words, hearing them or saying them, that we lose track of what they even mean. And for me, that word captures what I was just talking about with thy, but the word done, what does that mean? That means action. That means doing. That doesn't mean just thinking and understanding. We can do that all day and keep it to ourselves. But that's not what we're being asked to do. We're being asked to manifest, to live in a state of doing that brings our heavenly nature, that brings that spiritual nature, that brings that divinity into our lives and expresses it. So for me, I mean, he's putting our toes to the fire a little bit here, saying, don't just think about it. Don't just believe it. Don't just understand it. Thy will be done. So it's on all of us to, without criticizing or condemning ourselves or anyone else, to just reflect on, are we doing that? How are we bringing that, the essence of Spirit into our lives as much as we can? And where we fall short, that's okay. We just reflect on that and we learn from it. We love ourselves regardless of the mistakes we make. They're not really mistakes because we learn from them, right? It's a matter of reflection. That's part of our spiritual practice. First we understand, and then we act, and then we reflect, and we repeat the process. The Buddha talked about it a little bit differently. Well, let's go back a little further in time. Maybe we're like 2,500 years now back. And he talked about it a different way. And I think that's one of the really incredibly wonderful things about having so many amazing spiritual teachers and spiritual masters having walked the planet with us, is that there's something powerful we can learn from each of them. It's not all or nothing. It's like, what can I learn from this person and how they spoke and what they taught for the time that they lived and the people they were speaking to? So the Buddha talked about the world being an illusion, right? He said it was Maya. And in that way, he's reminding us that this isn't the real reality, right? This is a relative reality. It's relative to our perception and our experience. It's temporal. It comes and goes. It passes. It's not the real reality lies beneath what we see and perceive, beneath that, the illusion. And some people might think, well, it's not an illusion. This really happened to me, or this really happened to somebody else. It relatively really did. In terms of our experience and our perception, it did. Buddha is just calling our attention to that's not the ultimate reality of what's underneath us and everything else that there is. So one of the things, to kind of put them side by side for a moment, the Buddha and Jesus, one of the things that I appreciate so much about Jesus's teachings, it's not that they're different. They're maybe said in a different way, but the underlying truths, truth is truth, right? So if we can get to that doesn't change. That's unalterable. It's eternal. It's unalterable. But Jesus, for me, took it a step further. So when the Buddha talks about enlightenment and enlightened living, enlightenment being the end of suffering, right? Once you recognize and are able to really embody and understand that the world is illusion, that really brings about an end of suffering. But Jesus talked about the next step. And then the next step being not waiting until the afterlife, not just understanding that this world is illusion, but with that understanding, how do we embody our spiritual nature now, in this life, not waiting for some future life or until we drop these bodies and then it's all going to be good and then we're going to be in heaven and then. Jesus reminds us, on earth as it is in heaven. So don't wait until then. The time is now. This is a tremendous opportunity for all of us as spiritual beings and human bodies to come closer and closer to living that expression. So that is, I feel like particular to Jesus is saying, understand it and then bring it now. Bring it on today. Now fast forwarding, where are we? Fast forwarding 2,500 years. We'll talk about another spiritual teacher, more contemporary, just for a moment. Eckhart Tolle says it another way, right? And one of the things I love Eckhart Tolle. I've studied him backwards and forwards. I've been on many retreats with him, and I love it. I love him and his teachings. And one of the things that's so powerful about Eckhart is that they're relevant to today's audience, to today's listener, to today's society. So, each teacher speaks in their own way at their own time, again, talking about the same underlying truths, but in ways that are hopefully relevant to the people who are listening. And so Eckhart talks about dying to the past every day. Dying to the past every day. And I find that tremendously liberating. If we could do that for
I'm telling you, one day.
One day, 5 minutes,
Wow.
right?
Lord knows.
Thank you. Because what we do, that past, the things that have happened to us, the things that we regret, the things we're resentful about or angry about, the things we feel guilty about, the mistakes we think we made or someone else made. You know, it doesn't take long, and we're carrying those things around like big, heavy chains, and we cannot be present. We just can't be, because we're being tugged to something that happened yesterday or last week or 10 years ago, or something that happened, you know, just as we were pulling up this morning, or whatever. And we've got to learn to let that go. He says, die to the past. And the past is used broadly. It means anything that's already happened. Die to the past every moment. That is something to strive for. That's a strong, pure spiritual practice. If we can die to the past and also not be consumed with anxiety or worry or thinking about the future, we let all that go and just be here now. So in that practice, I just want to remind us all, because reflecting on this call to action, probably many of us, or most of us, or maybe even all of us, are accustomed to judging ourselves and others, right? So when I say call to action, we immediately start to think how good or how bad, or where I was really good at this, or I wasn't good at this. I did this really well. I made this mistake. We're going to set all that aside. This is a classroom, right? This life is a classroom. We keep our eyes focused on what we're here to learn and what we're trying to, we're striving to embody. And then we cut ourselves a whole heck of a lot of slack. And we allow ourselves to not be perfect, right? It's okay. What's important is that we get up, we dust ourselves off, and we get back to our practice. So I want to put that and just kind of close with in practical terms. I love that Charles Fillmore, what ultimately came to become Unity, right? When he and Myrtle were developing their own teachings and practices, and they referred to it as practical Christianity. And I think that is a wonderful way to think about it, because again, it reminds us that we're not just here to understand lofty ideas that other people understood and that we're sort of like, okay, I think I get it. But the practicality of it is, how do we live that and express that and embody that in our own lives? And I'm going to continue to talk about this. And I was thinking about it, earlier this week. I'm like, well, I don't know if they're going to like my talks, because it's just not a feel-good talk. It's a feel-good, great, but now act. It's not enough to just go walk out of here or wherever you might be and seeing this and just feel good and understand. It's time to act. So in our spiritual practice, we can ask, when Jesus talks about on earth as it is in heaven, what does that look like? What does that mean? What does it look like in our daily lives? Well, bar's set pretty high, because we had quite a way shower there, right? Bar's set high, where what it looks like is unconditional love. Unconditional love. That alone, we could spend lifetimes trying to be able to express unconditional love. That's the love of the Spirit. That's the love of the Spirit. It might not be the love of our identities. It might not be the love of our ego. It might not be the love of this body that we've grown up with and the things we've been taught. But that's the love of Spirit. So wherever we can allow that unconditional love of Spirit to come through us, that's our spiritual practice. That's bringing to earth what is in heaven. Unconditional forgiveness is another aspect. That is the will of the Spirit. The will of the Spirit is unconditional forgiveness. And that's what we're being asked to do. And when we allow that Spirit to come through us, we can see past ours and anyone else's learning process. I'm not even going to call them mistakes. It can be so tough sometimes. It can be so tough. And we just have to really trust that, this person is not what I'm looking at. This person underneath that is divinity, just as I am, shares that same spiritual nature. And that can help us reach that place of forgiveness. That is the will of Spirit. The recognition of oneness, we heard that in some of the music this morning. That's the vision of Spirit. That's how Spirit sees, right? It sees one in all. It doesn't see me and you and us versus them. It doesn't see Republicans and Democrats and this and that. It doesn't. The vision of Spirit sees past that to the oneness. And we talk about it, we sing about it, but as we're able to allow that vision to come through our own eyes and our own experience, then we can connect with that as well. And then lastly, the care for all, the care for all. That's the call to action, right? That is the action of Spirit. And if we're really in touch with Spirit and we allow that to come through us, it can be tough because we see things that aren't right, that we're not manifesting at all in alignment with the will of Spirit. And it's tough to see that. I think the first step is to notice and to bring that sense of care. This isn't okay. I need to do something about this. And this is where, again, this is part of my approach to this spiritual talk, is that it's not enough to understand. We have to then bring it to action. We have to bring to earth what is in heaven. So that physical expression of our true nature is that call to action. So in closing, I guess what I'm trying to say is when we experience that spiritual rebirth, when we're reborn, when we're born again, then we are able to live more fully on earth as it is in heaven. We're saved from the world of illusion, right? We can bring into this world or embody the true nature, our true spiritual nature, and bring that to fruition here. And in doing so, that's how we create on earth as it is in heaven. So, thank you all. Thank you.
Yeah.